Hey guys, so for my first video I wanted to talk about the boy in the box. He's also known as America's Unknown Child, and he was officially found by the police on February 25th, 1957. This case has stunned police and interested parties for decades. The boy was found on Susquehanna Road. I'm sure I didn't pronounce that right, but it's in the Fox Chase area of Philadelphia. And he was found on about the 21st or 22nd by a muskrat trapper. He was out there checking his traps, and he comes across the cardboard box, and when he looked inside, he saw the body of the young boy. But because he was illegally trapping, he wasn't eager to talk to the police, so he was afraid they might confiscate his traps, or there could possibly be some legal ramifications, so he just left the box where it was and went on his way. Now, a couple days later, a college student, Frank Bonosis, was driving down the road, and he says he saw a rabbit, and knowing that there were traps in the area, he thought he wanted to get out and check on the rabbit, make sure it was okay. Well, while looking for the rabbit, he comes across the cardboard box. He also looks in the box. He sees the body of the boy. Now, he wasn't eager to talk to law enforcement because he had been at the Good Shepherd School, which was a school for wayward girls, and he'd been spying on them, and he didn't want to have to explain that to the police. So he left the box where it was. He went home. Well, the next morning, he decided he would call the police and tell them where to find it. That's why the police found it on February 25th, rather than finding it on the 21st when it was first discovered. When the police found the body, he was in a box. He was naked, wrapped in a flannel blanket. He was battered, severely malnourished. The boy was described as having blue eyes, fair complexion, and medium to light brown, crudely cut hair. Now, they figure his hair was cut after death because they found clumps of hair on his body, and they figure this was probably to help hide the identity of the boy. They also noted that his nails were neatly trimmed and clean. He did have deep bruises covering much of his body and his face, and they speculate he was there anywhere from 2 to 3 days up to 2 to 3 weeks. It was hard to estimate because of the cold weather at the time. He had some surgical scars on his body, one by the ankle, one in the groin area, and an L-shaped scar on his chin. So they tried to follow up with some doctors in the area to see if they had performed a surgery on the boy, and they never found anything. They tried fingerprinting and taking prints of his feet, and they were hoping to compare them to birth records or hospital records and maybe find out who he was that way, but that also led nowhere. Now, they took x-rays of the boy's body, and it showed no evidence of current or prior breakages to the bones or anything. And they listed his cause of death as multiple blows to the head. The crime scene was searched many times. They discovered a man's blue corduroy cap, a boy's scarf, a man's white handkerchief with a G embroidered in the corner. And the handkerchief had some small hairs on it, so they sent it to be compared to the victim's hairs. And that came back negative. And they found nothing on these items they found to indicate that it was related to the boy in any way. So they started to focus on the box that the boy was found in. And it was a baby bassinet box, and it was one of 12 sold to a J.C. Penney store in Upper Darby, and all but one of those boxes they were able to track to the original purchaser. Now, the cops did everything they could. They sent out 400,000 flyers. They had them in police stations, post offices. They sent a flyer in with every gas bill that they sent out so that every home received one and had a chance to look at it in the hopes that somebody would recognize this boy. Now, on the flyer, it estimated the age as 4 to 5 years, But in newspaper articles, some say 3 to 7 years, some say 4 to 6 years. It was just really hard to tell because the boy only weighed 30 pounds when they found him, and that was due to the malnutrition. And so it left them with very little evidence in the case. The only evidence they really had was that the boy's hair had been cut and located on the body, so they knew it had been done post-mortem, and they figured it was to hide the identity. His hands and feet were wrinkled like they'd been submerged in water for a period of time, either just before death or after. And the box was dry, so it didn't happen after he was placed in the box. He hadn't had anything to eat 2 to 3 hours prior to death. The flannel blanket that he was wrapped in, they were able to find out it was made in either North Carolina or Quebec, Canada. The problem was it was mass produced and it was shipped to multiple locations, so there was no way to trace it. They did find that his esophagus contained a dark brown residue, which meant that he possibly vomited prior to death. Other than being severely malnourished and the cause of death being multiple blows to the head, that was the only evidence they had. So in 1957, they buried the boy in Pottersfield next to Mechanicsville and Dunks Ferry Road, and the tombstone simply read, "Heavenly Father, bless this unknown boy." Now, eventually the boy's body was exhumed in 1998 in the hopes of extracting some DNA. And they were able to get a very small amount of mitochondrial DNA off of a tooth. But they did state that it was such a small sequence of DNA that it would be hard to be a conclusive match. So on November 11th of 98, they reburied him, but this time they buried him in Ivy Hill Cemetery in Cedar Brook, Philadelphia. And Ivy Hill donated a large plot for the burial, and the coffin, the headstone, and the funeral service was donated by the son of the man who paid for the original burial in 57. There was a lot of public attendance and media coverage at the reburial, and the grave has a large headstone that now bears the words, "America's Unknown Child." The city residents try to keep it decorated with stuffed animals and flowers so that the boy's memory's never forgotten. Now, there were some theories that developed. One was in 1960 by Remington Bristow. He was an employee with the medical examiner's office, and he was so desperate to solve this case that he contacted a psychic in New Jersey, and her name was Florence Sternfeld. She'd never been to Pennsylvania, so he flew her there. He took her to where they discovered the body, and she led him straight to a foster home that was about 1.5 miles away. So he decided he wanted to check into that more, and it just so happened that they were going to have an estate sale, so he attended. While he was there, he did find a bassinet that was similar to the one sold at JCPenney, and he saw some flannel blankets that were similar to what the boy was wrapped in that were hanging on a clothesline. And he came to the conclusion that the boy belonged to the stepdaughter of the man that ran the foster house, and that the death might have been accidental, and they disposed of the body so it wouldn't be discovered that she was an unwed mother. Now, they were able to talk to all 8 of the foster children in the home, and none of them mentioned there ever being another child there, and there was no conclusive evidence to prove that he had been. Now, there was still speculation that Arthur Nicoletti, who ran the foster home, was involved because he refused to take a lie detector test. But in 1998, Tom Augustine, who was a Philadelphia police lieutenant, interviewed both Nicoletti and his stepdaughter. Now, in '98, Nicoletti was married to the stepdaughter. But he interviewed both of them, and they did run the DNA test against the stepdaughter they believed to be the boy's mother, and it came back negative. She was not his mother. So that's been dropped, and that's not going to be brought back up. Now, in May 2002, a woman that they simply called M from Cincinnati, Ohio, claimed that her mother purchased the boy in 1954 from the boy's parents. She said the boy's name was Jonathan, that her mother kept him in the basement, that's where he lived, that's where he was confined to, that he suffered both physical and sexual abuse over the years, and that her mother killed him in a fit of rage by bashing his head on the wall and against the floor, and then while giving him a bath, he vomited and died. Now, they investigated it. They spent almost 6 months locating former neighbors and people that had access to the house, and all of them claimed that M's statements were just ridiculous. There were no other children in the home. They'd been in the home. They'd never seen a child. And it was also discovered that she had a history of severe mental problems, so none of the information was reliable or could be corroborated. Now, a forensic artist, Frank Bender, developed a theory that the victim may have been raised as a girl, is why no one had identified the boy. And he came to this conclusion because of the child's unprofessional haircut, which seemed to be performed in haste after death to hide the identity, and the fact that the boy's eyebrows appeared to be plucked and sculpted in a feminine style. So he released a sketch of the unidentified child with the long hair, and he judged the length by the clumps of hair that were found on the body. And when he released it, still no one came forward to identify or say they might recognize the child. So that also went nowhere. Then in 2016, Jim Hoffman and Louis Romano believed they discovered a potential identity from Memphis, Tennessee. They requested that the DNA be compared between the family members and the boy in the box. Local authorities confirmed that they would investigate the lead, but stated that they needed to do more research on the circumstances surrounding the link to the Memphis family before doing any DNA testing. And I can't find anything else on it, so I'm assuming they must not have done it. But on March 21st in 2016, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children released a facial reconstruction of the victim, and they have added him to their database. And as recently as August of 2018, Barbara Ray Venter, who was the genetic genealogist who helped identify the Golden State Killer using a DNA profiling technique, stated that she was going to use the same method to try to identify the boy in the box. So maybe there's still hope that we can identify this boy and find out who he was. If you have any theories or any more information than I have, please leave them in the comments. I'd like to hear from you. And if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. And if you want to be notified of future uploaded videos, be sure you click on the bell. And I guess I'll see you next time.